Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Kennedy. I'm a consultant with Thorogood, and today I'm going to talk through some different stages in your organization's journey in analytics based on what we've seen customers do and the teams that we've seen there and how they operate in their analytics practices. So we're going to go through three different stages that talk about different shapes of the ways that people are approaching analytics in their company. So the first of those is companies that are looking at one-off experiments. So what does that look like? That looks like either a data science team or individuals in pockets across the business asking intelligent questions and using data and statistical or machine learning algorithms to try and solve those. Typically, in the one-off experiment stage, each analysis is treated as a standalone piece of work, very often gathering the data in whatever format it's currently available, and typically trying a number of different techniques, throwing out the ones that don't work and improving on the ones that do. And through all of this, teams are generating outputs that could be sets of forecasts, they could be predictions, or it might be a report on the findings of the analysis. Typically, the data science team will package those up and present them to stakeholders as a one-off output from the analysis. Now, at this stage, there are a couple of benefits to doing this kind of one-off analysis. One, it's a really quick way to get answers to your questions. And secondly, even though it's quick and it's all one-off, it can uncover some of the biggest, most obvious things that the data is trying to tell you. And that can suggest changes to how you're making decisions or how you're running processes in the business. And pivoting on those things can deliver some step changes in optimizing the way you work as an organization. But it also comes with a few challenges. So typically we see that organizations in this mode aren't thinking about repeatability as they're building the analyses. Often that can mean that it's either costly or even next to impossible to make updates and changes to the analysis after the initial set has been completed. It's also difficult to audit the analysis, so it could be harder for whoever's making decisions to put their trust in the analysis. And even worse than that, if you see mistakes or you find mistakes in the analysis, those can go unnoticed, or if you discover them in the data, you might even have to go back to the drawing board to try and figure out where that's come from. There's also another risk in here, and that's with statistical approaches. There's an increased risk when you try a lot of different options without documenting the process. So when you're trying a number of different options, you need to take account of that when you're validating the outputs. And if you don't know what you've tried, it can be very difficult to do that. So it's something that's easier to fall foul of when the organization is prioritizing this kind of one-off experimental view and doing a lot of analyses that it's really difficult, for example, to have multiple people review those. Let's move on to the second stage, and that's repeatable scripts. So what does that look like? That's when we have data science teams or people across the organization again, but writing scripts that are written to be reused, designed from the start with the expectation of running them multiple times, either with a view to testing them on different data sets or to rerun those as data sets get corrected or updated or changed, or just to rerun the scripts on a regular basis. If you know you're going to be getting a new data set in every month, then you want to have a repeatable script that you can rerun when that new data comes in. And those repeatable scripts can be run either manually, or at this stage, a lot of companies will start to build in some level of automation. Now, there may be manual tweaking. Often there's a few manual inputs that need to be provided throughout the process. But the objective is to have scripts that run end to end, ideally at the press of a button, from original input data sets to the output results, whatever the format of those is. So the output might be forecasts, it might be predictions, or in some cases, the output will be a model that can then be published. At this stage, it's often a manual publishing or making the model available to end users. And that's often going to be manually reviewed and either sent out to users or published somewhere that users can get access to. But there's some manual process in doing that. Now, there are a lot of benefits at this stage over the kind of one-off analysis approach. And the biggest benefit, obviously, is the ability to rerun the analysis as the data changes and as you look at different views of the data. If you want to make a small change to the analysis or to change one of the assumptions in the modeling, often that's a much smaller change to make when you can change just one or two lines of code and run it across the whole end-to-end process all in one go. There's also a big win for auditability. So if there's a question around the validity of the analysis, you can always look back at the code that's been run and, if necessary, rerun parts of it, rerun steps to see where the analysis went out of line. And then when you're writing code with the intention that it will be reused, there's also the advantage that gives you the opportunity to build with future use in mind as well. So you can choose to parameterize certain aspects of it to allow the analysis to be reused in a slightly different scenario. So maybe today you're running analysis for Singapore customers, but expecting that in the future you might want to reuse that for other countries in the region. And so you can parameterize things in the script that you want to be able to change and set those each time you run it. Of course, every system also has some challenges, and here that opportunity to parameterize and make things more flexible can come with a temptation to take that too far. So I would recommend in that case that you build first and foremost for what you want to deliver now, design it so that it can be rerun, and think about flexibility. But rather than trying to add all of the flexibility at once, know that having the script designed to run end to end will make it so much easier to add some of that flexibility in later. So don't overcomplicate it all in one go. That can be a bit of a temptation when you're in this approach. The other challenge is once you start to run multiple versions, the next task you're going to have to get to is thinking about how you track the different runs and versions. If you're running the script a whole load of times, that can generate maybe hundreds of sets of outputs eventually. Even if you've only got 5 or 10, it can still be difficult to keep track of what settings you had, which versions of the data sets that you use, and so on. So you need to start thinking about how you track and monitor as you're going through the different versions of the data, whether there have been any changes to the code, and if you've got parameters in there, what parameter settings are used in each of the output sets that you have. So that almost starts bringing us into stage 3 and sets the scene for MLOps. And MLOps, really, what does that look like? It's when we've got everything automated end to end, all of the scripts are repeatable, automated, and they run end to end without manual intervention at all. Any settings that need to be adjusted for each run are provided typically as parameters and provided before the analysis is run. The bigger thing compared to repeatable scripts, the biggest win I think, is that everything is tracked. So the data used is recorded, the version of the script, parameter inputs are logged. Any models that are built will have validity metrics automatically tracked, and the models themselves are stored as versions in a catalog so that you can always track back and see which versions have been built, what data set do they relate to, and what version of the script did they run on. Even as you're doing that, new incoming data is going to be profiled so you can see when there are changes in patterns or the behavior in the data that will indicate that you should be considering changes to the model. So there's a whole lot of tracking and monitoring that goes on in MLOps that allows you to have much more control over the system, to have much more confidence in what's going on, and to make changes as you need to. Talked a little bit about the proactive monitoring that's taking place. Like I said, that's not just at the point the models are published, but repeatedly over the period they're being used, up to the point where the model metrics indicate that the model ought to be improved or replaced to match changes that are observed in the business. Beyond the machine learning itself, in MLOps, the machine learning is viewed as part of the wider production system of the business. So you'll track things like availability and uptime of the deployed model. Often those will be viewed alongside key model metrics that help business users to understand what information is available, what insights can you get to what's happening in the business, and how accurate are those expected to be. Finally, MLOps, as you get more advanced in MLOps, it's usually worth building in automated tests and validation applied both to the model and to the wider system. So as you get more and more advanced, more and more of the system can be automated, and you can have those tests running automatically so that the whole model can be run, it can be retrained and rebuilt on newer data, kept up to date as behavior and patterns are changing, and flags are only raised to the data science team to go and check it when something goes wrong. So that's the target. Even in this stage, not everyone has all of the things. It takes a bit of time to build towards this, but the more of that automation, the more of that tracking and monitoring you can build in, the less management time needs to go into the model, apart from when it actually needs to be looked at and considered more carefully. So there are big benefits to that, obviously. First off, the really big thing for businesses is if you're relying on the models day to day for decision making, or models that are driving automated decisions in some cases, having this level of reliability and visibility is absolutely essential to give you the trust in the model as an important part of your business processes. It also helps you understand that as soon as something changes, whether that's model accuracy falling or new patterns emerging in the input data, your team can be alerted to that, and you can go in to adjust the model accordingly. And sometimes that model adjustment can be automatic. Sometimes that will involve a lot of human intervention. But either way, here we're talking about it being triggered by automated flags. So something changes in the system, that automatically triggers some sort of process, whether it's automatic retraining or it's triggering an email to the data science team to say, hey, you need to go in and take a look at this. When the whole thing's properly designed and running smoothly, you generate a whole load of fantastic logs that are not only useful at the individual project level, but they can be rolled up from individual projects to give management a visibility across all the models that are being used in the organization. And that helps to quickly identify where there are models that need attention, but it also helps you to understand how much value is being driven from across the whole set of models that are available, and how much value is the organization getting from the data science investment that's being put in. Major benefits there. Again, we've identified a few challenges here. First off, this is the hardest of the three stages to get set up and to get into the habit of doing. It requires more work to get it set up. And there's also a very big mindset shift. This is the hardest of the three stages to get into the habit of doing. It requires more work, and there's a mindset shift needed in the teams that are collaborating to build something that is more robust and builds into a manageable automated system. Getting the most value from MLOps requires looking to have a common approach across the organization. So we talked about that unified monitoring across the whole organization and being able to roll up and see what's happening. So while the system can involve many different tools and approaches in the individual projects to build the actual models, you should look to have a common approach to logging and monitoring in particular, and ideally for other aspects such as the code management and automated testing. So with this thing, it's usually best to look for a common approach as far as you can have it, but a flexibility to allow you to use different tools when they add advantage to the individual projects. And that can take a lot of work. There is also a risk that tying every project into the MLOps delivery from the start can leave people more focused on the process and less focused on the experimentation and innovation that really is what's driving the business value from the changes that you're making in the organization. So if every analysis has to be built completely to run end to end, obviously that could take a lot more work just to try and work out whether a new analysis even works in the first place. So what's the recommended approach for that? I would say start simple and build with the goal in mind. Start by building a model, test out what works, but keep in view that you're going to want to be tracking each test run and keeping track of what's working and what isn't as early as possible. And then similar to the repeatable script stage, once you've got scripts that you can run end to end, it becomes faster and easier to try new things out. So once you know that something works, start building in some of the automated processes earlier rather than later. You'll get more benefit from that by being able to use those earlier. I'll say as well, if someone wants to try a quick experiment and not do the MLOps stuff right from the start, you don't have to fight against that completely, because you can always bring in the MLOps approaches later. But bear in mind, the longer it stays outside of the system, potentially you're going to give yourself more work to bring it in later, but also the longer it stays outside the system, you're losing some of the value that you get from having those automated processes in place that help with doing more experimentation even. So don't let MLOps and the MLOps processes be the blocker in allowing teams to try new things out. Instead, try to help them think about the roadmap to bringing it into the proper approach early, once they've shown that there's something valuable. That gives you an introduction, hopefully, to the three stages that we have. I'm sure you can see from that why each of these stages adds something valuable over the previous stage. So the one-off analysis allows you to answer the big questions quickly and deliver value to the business. So if you're doing nothing, get started on that and start delivering value. Repeatable scripts improves on that with the ability to rerun analyses, provide some level of auditability, and allows reuse in similar scenarios. MLOps, as the end goal in this, presents a fully automated solution that gives full auditability, reliability, and the robustness needed for a system that is driving the outputs that are used in important business decisions. So a lot to think about. But if you want help in understanding how you can move your organization to the next stage with machine learning and analytics, Thorogood has experience guiding enterprise organizations in establishing data science teams, designing technology approaches to machine learning, and in embedding MLOps patterns and approaches in enterprise companies. And we'd be happy to talk to you about where you are in this journey and how we can work together to help you find your way to the next stage. So if you're interested in talking to me, you can reach me by email, andrew.kennedy@thorogood.com. And thank you for watching.